Okay. So hi, I'm Sam Epstein. I am one of the clinical neuroimmunology fellows at Columbia. And to start, I'm going to ask you guys to just introduce yourselves and go right ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Sarah Wesley, and I am a clinical neuroimmunologist working in the Multiple Sclerosis Center.
My name is Dr. Rebecca Farber. I'm a clinical neuroimmunologist working in the Multiple Sclerosis Center as well. And we're very excited to be with you today and talking about some interesting projects we have going on.
Perfect. Okay, so to start, we're going to be focusing on highlighting actually your guys' research in MS and related disorders and vaccination. So to begin, I wanted to ask what led you guys to pursue research into this topic, and why do you feel like this is both needed and important?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Epstein. So we've obviously been through a lot this year with the pandemic, and when we finally had a hope for vaccine to be authorized, there were a few questions that came to mind in particular for our patient population. So one, is the vaccine safe? And two, is the vaccine going to be effective in the patient population, considering that there's a high usage of immunotherapies that might impair the vaccine uptake. So that was sort of what we were discussing in the beginning. One thing to consider is that patients with active autoimmune diseases were largely excluded from most of the initial vaccine trials for COVID. And then also we know from prior work that was done with one of the MS medications, ocrelizumab, that there was a concern that people who are on certain agents might not mount like a full response to vaccinations. And that work had been done with the flu vaccine, pneumonia, pneumococcal, and then the tetanus toxoid vaccine. So these were we felt very reasonable questions that needed to be pursued. So we went ahead and designed a study that could capture both elements of safety and efficacy of COVID vaccinations with the hope of being able to use the information in real time in the clinic for people who are trying to make decisions around vaccinations.
Perfect. That's super interesting. And you brought up a few good points, which actually lead me to my next question. What are the current expert opinions about vaccination in multiple sclerosis and other autoimmune disorders?
Mm-hmm. And I think Dr. Farber too, like if you wanted to speak a little bit, to the last point too, with some of the hesitancy that we've seen also in the population, understandably.
Yes, absolutely. So as Dr. Wesley said, we do have a lot of unanswered questions, and we saw this from our patient population as well. There was certainly in the beginning some vaccine hesitancy because people were aware that they had conditions that were not studied in the clinical trials and were unique to them, both in terms of their underlying disease state and in terms of the medications they were taking. And we embarked on this to try to really collect some answers in real time and obtain data so that we could advise our patients on how best to be safe, as well as contribute to overcoming the pandemic as a whole.
So I think in terms of the question about what these bigger organizations are recommending for vaccines in the MS and in the autoimmune population in general. So we have a few organizations that have posted statements. So for example, the CDC, does recommend, adults of any age with underlying medical conditions, that are high risk for severe illness from COVID, assuming that they're of the age where the vaccines are approved, should consider getting vaccinated, understanding that certain autoimmune conditions, we're not in the initial clinical trials, so we don't have full set of safety data. However, so far, millions and millions of people have had the vaccine. So, the CDC has sort of revised things, and now they're actually saying not only, should you get vaccinated, but you should actually consider having a booster shot if you are moderately or severely immunocompromised, given concerns that people might not have mounted a full response to the initial set. And then, from the National MS Society, this is more specific for patients with MS. They strongly recommend people with MS to get the vaccine, that it is safe, and that having COVID itself could be very, very dangerous for someone with MS. None of the vaccines that are approved currently for COVID are live vaccines, which is a category that we do have some concern with for people with MS. So since none of them fall into that category, the recommendation is to go ahead and get vaccinated.
I will add on that the American Academy of Neurology has come out with a set of recommendations that patients with neurologic diseases do get vaccinated against COVID-19. This was done taking into account that the neurologic complications of COVID-19 vaccines are extremely low, whereas the neurologic complications of developing the case of COVID itself is actually rather high. And the fact that many patients with neurologic disease have baseline disability, as well as other factors that could actually increase morbidity and mortality of getting a COVID infection. The other thing I will mention is that all of these societies that have come out with these recommendations, and specifically, the National MS Society, what we do know, unrelated to COVID, is that as a whole, individuals who do get vaccines, things like yearly flu vaccines, other vaccinations, do have less MS disease activity than individuals who do not get vaccinated. So this is sort of a, although COVID is novel, it's not completely unlike other viruses, and this vaccine is not completely unlike other vaccines that have been studied more in depth.
That's super helpful. So it sounds like we're still learning, but the overwhelming consensus is that the benefits of the vaccines outweigh any risks of getting COVID itself, which kind of goes along the theme of prior vaccines and what we know about other viruses.
Correct, exactly.
So perfect. So that kind of touches a lot on the safety and kind of the background to the research that you guys are doing. And I know one of the projects you're working on kind of shifts gears a little bit into the efficacy of the vaccines, and specifically looking at the effect of immunotherapy and vaccine response. So can you guys outline just the overall overarching objective of the project you guys are doing?
Sure, yeah. So we've been recruiting people with multiple sclerosis, MOG-associated disease, and neuromyelitis optica, or NMO spectrum, who basically were planning to obtain the COVID vaccine, and agreed to give blood samples before and after vaccination, with the idea that we could understand, how well people are uptaking the vaccine, both from a B cell standpoint and also from a T cell standpoint, which is relevant for certain MS medications in particular that target B cells. And so we've been following that, and also from not just from an efficacy, but also from a safety standpoint too. We've been following how people's experiences have been while getting the vaccine, and monitoring for any safety concerns, as well as finding out if people ended up having COVID despite vaccination. So that's the sort of data that's been collected.
Perfect. That's really interesting. And you might not be able to say, but how have things been going? Any preliminary thoughts on what you've done so far?
Sure. So I will say that our recruitment has been going very well, in the sense that people are really excited about this project, and patients are really excited about participating, because these are questions that we all want to know the answer to. We've actually exceeded our enrollment goals, which for those people who do clinical trials is quite unusual. And we will see, there is certainly at this point, there is some data out there showing some of it coming from Israel, from Anat Achiron, showing that patients on certain medications, specifically B cell depleters, as well as fingolimod, which is a lymphocyte depleter, have greatly reduced antibody response. What is less well understood is what the T cell response will be in individuals on these therapies and how this will translate clinically. So we're really looking forward to running the data and getting some more information.
That's great, very exciting. And I know this comes up at almost every clinic visit, but from your guys' point of view, how do you envision your results might impact kind of clinical practice around vaccination in these diseases?
So it's a great question. We run into this every day in terms of advising people not only whether to get the vaccine, but how to time the vaccine, whether or not therapies need to be interrupted or switched. And then again, in terms of whether or not to get the booster, when to get the booster, whether or not therapies need to be altered in order to make the booster more effective. We're hoping that we can get some more information to better guide our patients.
Perfect. So it's all great. Any questions that you guys think are still going to be left unanswered, or any plans for future research after this project?
Well, definitely, we have a lot to still learn in this domain. There are projects now, obviously, surrounding the boosters, because that's a sort of a hot topic right now in September of 2021. We are working as a site for an NIH project looking at booster response in people who have unfortunately not mounted a good response to the first set of vaccines. So allowing people access to a booster shot to try and increase their chance of actually, being immune to COVID. And then also sort of understanding, what is the immune system doing after the people get the booster, how robust is the response? And like Dr. Barber mentioned as well, I think, understanding the role of the T cells in COVID immunity is still something that there's a lot of work going on right now about. It's a very important question, and hopefully we'll have some answers soon.
Perfect. I hope so. I'm excited to see what you guys find. So thank you so much for discussing. I think this is going to be really useful. Anything else you wanted to add? Or
Great. No, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.